Welcome back into Basketball by Association. That was a 1-week commercial break we just took. Hope your life had lots of things that you bought and or sold, by the way. Who knows? We want to thank you for being a part of this here program. We is me, Arky, Shea, and that is Joel C. Cordes. Joel, what is up, sir? There has been some hoopage.
There has been some hoopage and some phenomenal series that I'm so excited to be starting into, as well as some that we got done with, which I think is kind of the whole point of this here show. But you and I were texting each other multiple times over this past week while we were off, in a couple of different series, and we're like, man, this is so great. This is exactly why, if you're into NBA basketball at all, much less playoff basketball, this is everything that we want it to be, and that's cool to be able to say. Also, Arky, I just want to point out that this is episode 104, and we've been naming it after a number of playoff games logged here. There are only 3 players in NBA history who have had 104 playoff games. One is Michael Thompson, who I'm a big fan of, and I would love to have named the show after him. One was Tommy Heinsohn, so we got a Laker and a Celtic, respectively. Wow. I'm less a fan of Tommy Heinsohn, but yeah, I get the appeal if you're from Boston.
Broadcasting legend too.
This is true.
Did he just pass away like in the last year?
I don't think so. I know
Tommy
he's
Heinsohn just passed away in the last year. Let me look that up real quick.
I know he was off the broadcast over the last year or two.
Yeah, died in November 2020. Okay, so
my condolences on that. That had slipped my mind. But the third guy is somebody who, no, he's not a New York Knick, but yes, your New York Knicks would know him very, very well from some of their long-standing clashes with this team. And no, it's not Reggie Miller, who I know you would not appreciate if we named it. But this guy, you might be able to appreciate from those long-standing clashes. Would you like to take a guess? It's not Reggie, but it is a longtime teammate of Reggie's. Long enough that he logged 104 playoff games, and long enough that he ran into your Knicks multiple times and would have been a fairly key character in said matchup. If I give much else away, you're going to be able to guess who he is. So just take your shot at a pacer here.
Well, yeah, you sort of mentioned at first I was going to go with someone like Alonzo Mourning, someone who the Knicks saw a lot.
It's a teammate of Reggie's. Yeah.
Then you went teammate. So I don't know who you mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
He's very, very tall.
Yeah. No.
Patrick Ewing would have had to tangle with him a lot.
No. Delete.
You're not going to name one after the Duncan Dutchman, Rick Smits?
Nope.
Because we are. This is a thing that's happening.
Nope. Hate that guy. Personally hate that guy.
You can call it the Tommy Heinsohn episode or the Michael Thompson episode. Both are acceptable. But in my heart, this is the Rick Smits episode, 7-4 Duncan Dutchman, who would have had a much longer and more productive career had the foot injuries not caught up with him. He was out of the league by 33, which is kind of crazy. Came in at 22. So did not play for all that long. And a lot of those seasons had lots of games missed by injury, especially near the tail end there. But yeah, multiple time All-Star, or I should say, no, only a one-time All-Star, oddly enough.
If you gave
was on the all-rookie team and did average double-digit figures in scoring his entire career.
If you gave me a week and said, I need you to construct and perfect with no additional add-ons the list of players you are most annoyed by in your New York Knicks fandom, he's in the top 5.
Can you explain? This is actually genuine interest for me, not being facetious, because having not been a New York Knicks fan and not having been in that, I understand why Knicks fans would hate Reggie Miller. I can understand why they'd hate the Davis brothers, for example. Rick Smits always seemed a little less innocuous than them.
I do differentiate between hate and annoyed by.
Okay.
Right? Like Reggie Miller, I loathe. Right? I just despise Reggie Miller. And that's completely all play, and that's completely one set of plays that really put it over the top. And I don't really want to talk about it anymore, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. Very young in my fandom and very much scarred ever since the emotional cartilage is no longer there. It's been worn down.
And Reggie Miller couldn't be happier to know that that's the truth.
Rick
Honestly.
Smits could compete with Patrick Ewing consistently
Mhm.
and was a gnat. He was way too good for that guy against Patrick Ewing, because
Mhm.
that guy was, and I hate to say it, okay? All right, but my long-term view of the league has been shaped and perceived by this. Dude's a honky, man. Dude is straight up honky. And like, it's annoying to me when like Patrick Ewing can be shut down at times by a Rick Smith or dunked on by a, like, that just annoyed the crap out of me. Like, it's not a personality thing. He was way too good for his skin color. Okay, like it just bothered me. It bothered me because Patrick Ewing, when I came into this, and by the time he was a Knick, I was, he'd probably been with the Knicks 8-9 years or something already. So it's not like it's brand new. But like, Patrick Ewing was this larger than life, like, basketball behemoth for my team. Like, I didn't know anything about the earlier Knicks yet, right? And to have like I want to say hero, but my basketball like god for someone, like, he was the guy for me at the very beginning, to be humbled not by Michael, right? Like, like that. I get it, right? But by Rick Smits, I mean, just, it was annoying. That's all. And he was very active with like his hand. I thought he committed a lot more fouls than he got called for. So, just annoyed. Just annoyed. Don't hate the guy, really. Just don't hate the guy. Just very annoyed by the skin tone to goodness against my Knicks ratio that was happening there.
There's a lot to unpack there that we're going to leave alone, but I understand that there are certain players throughout NBA history for the teams that I love that were kind of that way too. Oddly enough, and this is not to rub salt in the wound.
By the way, just real quick, just Google Rick Smits. That guy just doesn't look like. He just doesn't look like.
Well, beyond being 7'4", but yeah,
okay.
I
Besides
understand
the physical being
the 80s mullet, and yeah, no, I get it. He was.
That guy should have been clowned out of the league. Just look alone, right?
With a little less skill, he would have been considered one of the classic 80s and 90s stiffs, but he was not. Yeah. He was not a stiff center. He was not.
He wasn't, but like, you just look at this big Clydesdale just clopping down the floor, and you're like, come on.
Yeah.
Really?
No, I get that. It's really odd looking at him. We won't spend any more time on Rick Smits, but he never averaged double-digit rebounds in his entire career. As a 7'4" guy, he had more than 2 blocks a game multiple times, and that makes sense being the height. And the double-digit scoring, I do remember, like, he had a little bit of a jumper. He had some decent post moves. The hook shot was nice. He had some skill around the basket, despite, as you said, not looking the part. And shooting was better than advertised. But to not be double-digit rebounds, that's where I think the stiffness comes in a little bit. We're like, all right, well, how is he so deficient in certain areas and could be pushed around? But I will say this. He probably didn't have as many rebounds available to him when you've got Antonio and Dale Davis up front. And the Knicks and the Pacers, my biggest memory of those two teams, who I didn't care for either of them, but was just how massive those front lines were in the 90s. They were starting 2 legit power forwards at either forward spot. And today, those power forwards would be centers. Yeah. And they had a massive center up front on top of that. Like, today, we've started to see some teams go big again, but it's big with length and it's big with shooting. This was just big and muscular, and the Knicks to be able to trot out, Ewing and Oakley and Anthony Mason and then Larry Johnson, like, to team up against Smits and the Davis brothers. Like, it's no wonder that the league had to make rule changes. Like,
okay, we can't turn the league into a bar fight. Okay, all right, guys, like, this is ridiculous. By the way, look at this dork. All right, look at this guy. This just Cloppy Clydesdale just running around like just trying to dominate the game. Let me look at this guy. What is this guy? I mean, look at this.
He's
What
a
is
rich,
this?
He's a rich man's John Concac. That's what he is.
Fair enough, I guess. I mean, come on. By the way, you can see this on the YouTube version of the show. You can find us. Joe, where can people find us?
Like, share, subscribe over on YouTube. Look up Basketball by Association or BBA podcast. And of course, if you want the audio only version for all of this Rick Smith slander, that's Spotify, iTunes, Spreaker, wherever you get your podcasts. We should probably talk about modern day basketball. I would love to just do, and I think we've done something like this, but I would love to just do some 80s and 90s themed NBA podcast, maybe during the off season.
Yeah,
let's just go back down the time travel tube there.
Let's get past, I guess, what was like the first week in July, which is like the free agent signing. And maybe like that would do do a little something. Okay, Joel, let's get straight into it. 11 minutes in.
Right.
Joel, I don't want to linger on this series long because I want to talk about what's come out of it. But I do just want to give you the opportunity to talk about the loser of the series, your loser of a franchise, the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I just want to tell you that I felt for you this entire series, because this entire series that they had against Memphis was in the palm of their hand to be had.
It was winnable, yeah.
Completely winnable. And I feel bad for you because it felt like even though you text me, this is sort of the mistakes that they make. It still gotta hurt, man, to know that how good you were in this series, and you could be playing right now instead of Memphis, that you let so many large leads slip away in this in that series. And then we could wrap up Minnesota and move on to Memphis.
At no point, and we're on record here, at no point did I actually think Minnesota was going to win that series. So even as those massive... So
that never adjusted watching them play?
No.
Okay.
No. And some of it is my historical Minnesota fandom. I'm not really an NFL fan anymore, but in my past life, I was very much a Minnesota Vikings fan. They have just a long history of doing that crap, of pissing things away when they had very winnable games with very good teams, very, very, very good teams, and they just pissed it away. So I've seen this enough times in my life to know it when I see it happening and to be insulated from that. But with the Timberwolves, it's a little different. They were happy to be there. They were clearly just happy to be there. They had a lot of talent. They have a lot of talent to build off of. But the truth was, this was their first rodeo, and this was the first rodeo for too many guys on that roster. They were in
such a good position for the first.
But it wasn't. Yeah, no,
like they showed up and like got beaten 5, and they had
I understand
140 effort. Like it would tick me off as a fan of it. Whichever team. Like if my team was that good for so long, but just couldn't close it out more than a couple times they did.
Yeah, and some historic.
Really bad
jobs too. Yeah. And yet this I think epitomizes what I've seen from them all year, in that even as the massive lead was being blown not once but twice, and even as the Grizzlies came back on other occasions, was I frustrated on a play-by-play level of, Cat, why are you doing that? Dude, you've been making that same mistake your entire career. D'Lo, don't take that shot right now. We don't need that shot. Patrick Beverley, why are you forcing things? Yeah, your role is not to be our offensive critic. Like, just those sorts of things. Yeah, I would get frustrated with. But in the grand scheme of it all happening, I just sat and nodded my head and went, yep, this is happening. I know exactly how this game is going to end. I know what's going on here, because this team has been young, inexperienced, and sloppy way too often, but then brilliant at many other times as well. And the last couple of years prior to this, I would agree with what Charles Barkley lobbed at them in this series, where he called them dumb as rocks. The last couple years, yeah, they were talented, but dumb as rocks in the way they played. Some of that was coaching, some of that was personnel. This year, not dumb as rocks, but still stupid at times. And really, I would phrase it, I guess, from a coaching or a teaching aspect instead of a fan hyperbole. They got a lot to learn. They have a lot to learn, but they can be brilliant at times. They were 10 games behind where Memphis finished all year. Memphis was the better team. Memphis has been battle tested and gone through this before. I don't think Memphis is the more talented roster. Minnesota's roster, I think top to bottom, more talented with more potential than Memphis. But that doesn't mean anything in a playoff series ultimately when you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. The hope is here that they can take it. Now it's on film. Now it stings in a personal way. Hopefully this lights a fire under this rivalry like you and I have talked about before, and it becomes one of those first step growth things that every team needs to kind of go through, where it hurts when you're ousted in the playoffs, and sometimes you don't even get a puncher's chance. And Minnesota landed some good punches in this series. They landed
a bunch.
But they also left themselves open to take it on the chin multiple times. And you're either going to learn from that, or you're going to be one of those teams. And you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago when Minnesota was, acting like punks in the series. I said, there's a role for that type of team in the NBA playoffs and that type of character in the NBA drama. But if you're Minnesota, do you really want to be the LeBron era Washington Wizards or the LeBron Heatles era Indiana Pacers? Do you really want to be those teams, or do you want to be better than that? And that's going to be a crossroads in the next couple of years for this group.
You and I both thought that's had the best chance of being the most entertaining series in the first round. Just yes or no, did you think it lived up to the billing? I think yes.
I think yes, and I do think we got robbed out of a 7-game series.
I would have loved a 7-game, but for the 6 games, like all of the discussion points out of it, the great plays, even as bad as Cat was at times, the fact that he came back and had good games still,
and Memphis made some boneheaded plays too. Like you saw their youth at times as well, where it's like, Memphis
average age
wouldn't do that.
Memphis average age is 14. Like you're going to be able to get there. Like John Morant's been in the league for 7 seconds. Like it's just, it's going to get there. But okay, so peace be with you to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And now we get forward. Real briefly, I just want to mention the other game you were talking about that. Talk about how good the series were and sometimes can be at the highest level in the NBA. That was Game 6 of the Pelicans and Suns that I was texting you about. I was sort of sitting at a bar watching it, and at one point in the third and fourth quarter, they were just trading shots, well executed everything. Chris Paul, of course, was having his 13 for 13 game, but everyone was performing at a high level. And even though it wasn't like a 135 to 121 type game, it was just high quality playoff type basketball, and you don't necessarily expect that from the 8th seed, but that's why I think you and I are so interested in New Orleans going forward, is because there's a foundation there. So we don't have to really spend much time on that, but that's just the other game I was texting you about that we should mention, and we don't really have dogs in the fight.
And kudos to the Pelicans in that. Yeah, there was some rookie mistakes made there, especially down the stretch when Phoenix closed them out. You saw the youth start to show. But by and large, they executed better in that series than Memphis and Minnesota did collectively in their own series. They were both enormously entertaining for different reasons. But New Orleans, for a team that was there and very new, and yes, they had some guys who had been through the wars before. CJ McCollum, Valanciunas has been through it before and so forth. But so many young guys who had never been on that stage, and to be able to go toe-to-toe with the champs or the Western Conference champs, even when they had Devin Booker, when they didn't have Devin Booker, and just execute and hang in there and show what that foundation can be as they mature, as hopefully they get Zion Williamson back and they make a few more tweaks. Like, we were all very, very skeptical about what New Orleans was going to do when they started out so badly at the beginning of the season. It was like, man, is Willie Green in over his head? And instead, you see that Willie Green can very much be, for them, the not only like the teacher and the mentor and the coach, but kind of the heart and soul of what the culture becomes. The way that Monty Williams has has ingrained himself in Phoenix, a team that had been talented for a long time, but underachieving and young, and just needed that, not only that basketball guide, but almost like that spiritual guide, that heartbeat guy for them. And Monty Williams has been able to do that. And you just see the potential that New Orleans has on the court, but also what Willie Green can bring to them. I was so impressed with what he brought to the table, and everybody, you know, former players, former teammates, or I should say former teammates because he hasn't had former players, and current players just are swearing by the guy.
I'll tell you what this smells a lot to me like is that the foundations when Phoenix was starting to get built, right? Like it feels like that there's a lot of sort of similarities. Not I don't know if they're going to be the number one seed next year and sort of run through the entire West, but it feels like a good young coach getting a great opportunity, great young foundation there. A Brandon Ingram who's been around for a while, who's taken a huge step in his production. You know, you get like a Zion Williamson type back, you know, player back. If he's anywhere near what we've seen him kind of be, and who knows what you do in free agency or the draft, like this smells a little bit of like what, you know, Phoenix was. The joke was they're a couple years away every couple of years, like they're just a couple years away, and then all of a sudden they were here, and you can't get rid of them for a couple of years. It kind of feels like that without having to have like, you know, a 51-year-old Chris Paul at this point.
Think about the Western Conference right now. We know Golden State's elite. Phoenix is going to be around for a while. Denver and Dallas are going to be in that mix. Now, Utah might be on the outs and get blown up. Portland's not coming back for a while. They're going to be in a full rebuild. The Clippers, that could either be a team that hangs on near the bottom, you know, or they get Kawhi and Paul George back and they become a threat. But you have Memphis, Minnesota, and New Orleans, who are all either there already or on the cusp of being really badass teams in the Western Conference. And I just point that out because that does not bode well for an aging, dysfunctional team like the Los Angeles Lakers, where everybody's getting younger, better, more cohesive in what they do. And you're going to have to run up against that. I mean, we just named like 6-7 teams that the Lakers right now, and this isn't a Lakers show, but for example, an aging team like that has no freaking chance against as they get younger, as these younger teams get more mature now, and as those that are already elite are going to hold on to that perch for a bit because they're not old. None of those teams I just named off, including the Warriors, yeah, some of their stars are getting up there, but they're not old yet.
No, and then we move on because we got 4 series I want to get to, and we don't have 2 hours today to do it. Even though it feels like Rick Smith is trying to annoy me into this in this episode.
What he would do.
3 potential real TV draw new teams too.
All from small markets.
This isn't the Zach Randolph Memphis Grizzlies. This isn't San Antonio, who's really good and it's really hard to watch at times. Like this is really watchable basketball with stars on them. And people,
you got Ja, you got Zion, you got Anthony Edwards, and then supporting guys on each team that are watchable.
People who want to watch basketball want to see these teams, and people who don't want to watch basketball want to see these players. So, like, if you're heading into a really good spot for the NBA, especially if Zion doesn't try to force his way out of New Orleans after playing, I think, 4.5 games this year.
He would be so dumb to do that, and karma will follow him the rest of his career if so. Like.
He could turn his image around in New Orleans immediately if he just comes back and plays hard and just gets in shape and is able to get back on the court. Okay, Golden State Memphis, a game that wrapped up last night. This was the game that you were texting me about. That like, oh man, this game is in the series is so damn good, and it really, really, really is. Like this feels like a postseason where Ja was on the ascension during the regular season, and a postseason where he is really breaking out. And all of a sudden, like we are now at superstar level for Ja Morant. And I'll tell you what, this series I'd hoped to go long because I thought it could be really good, and I'm so pleased after the first 2 games because it looks like it can go the distance. This is good. This is a good one.
And I'll just point out a couple of things that have stood out to me because I agree with everything you said, and we had picked this one to go 6, maybe 7 games, and I think we're absolutely there. The ball movement by both teams to just keep the ball popping is really impressive, but what's even more impressive is how both teams know that that is going to happen, and their rotation to be able to cover and recover when the ball starts popping around the wing is what really in game 2 just stood out to me over
Joel, these
and
teams
over
don't play
again.
defense anymore. They don't play defense.
Yeah.
They show up at a gym with a ref and just
right. That's so ridiculous because we can go down this whole list of series, and most of these series are being defined by defense and are being defined by very, very good defensive teams. But yeah, I mean, just time and again, I'm watching going, all right, here's the swing. Ball went into the corner out of a kick out. The swing is coming. Golden State's going to find an open shooter like they always do. Nope. Memphis was there at every single rotation and sometimes even jumped the pass, and then vice versa. Desmond Bane has been a non-factor through these first 2 games after being the star in the first round series, and Ja even said it himself. Desmond Bane was the star against Minnesota for as good as Ja was. Bane cannot get going. Golden State is just draped on him, and that is so much easier said than done because Bane is a very classic prototype 3-point shooter, but he's also very, very athletic, very good at moving around, without the ball, similar to a Reggie Miller, similar to a Rip Hamilton, similar to Steph Curry, where they move off screens. But Desmond Bane is built differently than those 3 guys who are all kind of wiry and kind of shifted their way through screens. And Desmond Bane is built like, a little bit of a fullback, a little bit of a linebacker. He's a big muscular dude and there's power behind it. And so he's a little more straight line, I think, than those guys are around screens, but he cannot get open. He cannot get good looks with the ball right now. And that is huge. And then, Ja had 47, but Ja's having to work and Steph is having to work and Klay Thompson is not getting easy looks right now. And inside, I mean, we saw Dillon Brooks get ejected after 3 minutes. I don't know. I'm not going to say that his play was any dirtier than Draymond's was in the previous game where Draymond got ejected.
How about that first 2 games? We had a couple of ejections for some flagrantness on one side or the other.
And Draymond's got to get stitches, and it's a brawl.
Yeah, busted open.
It's a brawl inside.
These 2, there's a series that's a little more so that we'll talk about in a minute, but this is such a tough, hard-fought series so far. It's so physical between these 2 teams. And Golden State's been playing great defense all season. Mm-hmm. Like, this is why we sort of thought that this would be sort of a Remember Us tour. Is that Klay was eventually going to come back and try to be – he wasn't going to be what we knew Klay Thompson was going to be. But if he could give you a little something –
yeah.
You can sort of get
and he's a lot closer than not, right? He's a lot closer than we expected.
He's closer than not. Steph Curry took a step back at some point later in the season, then with the injury, and sort of slowly been sort of trying to revamp back into what Steph was. But remember, these guys started being the Splash Brothers like 8 years ago, 7-8 years ago. Like they've got some miles on them too. And they play a style that, is a lot of, let's just say, a lot of knee banging that you're going to have to do, especially with how much they like to put Steph off these screens and try to sort of, get him these open looks just by putting bodies in the way. Like it can.
And
wear
Steph
on
gets to the basket and gets knocked down just about every time. He flops a little bit, but he's on the ground almost every time he goes to the basket.
Yeah, so you can see some of these things sort of build up to a team where, like, if you look at who they're playing, Memphis, again, I'm barely exaggerating when I say that their average age is 14, right? They are a really young team with lots of legs under them right now. That's why I thought this would be one of the most, and I thought had a chance to be the best series of any possible matchup we could get.
I agree.
Because you have the youth that don't know no better, the superstar, and really good complementary pieces for Memphis, and you have the wily veterans who are still very, very good, can sharpshoot with anybody, and also got a couple of bangers underneath that are going to make things difficult for you.
And some young legs helping them out too, and the supporting cast as they're recharged quite a bit.
And after the first 2 games, I feel very good about thinking this would be one of the best series that we could have gotten out of the entire postseason. But Ja did something that we don't give enough credit for, like noticing when guys sort of blow onto the scene, right? Like at the time when it's happening. But like we are seeing the crowning of the next great basketball player in the association. Now, obviously, you want him to be able to win more, but to be able to get him in these high-profile positions with high-profile teams on high-profile television market and matchups in the time slots, and for him to be as good as he is when he gets onto those stages. Like, dude, he's either doing some kind of dunk that deserves to be a non-fungible token, or like he's going for 50 almost in a game against the Warriors and multi-time champs. Like it's so fun to be able to be at an age to recognize that somebody is absolutely got a rocket strapped to their butt right now, and it's really kind of fun to watch.
And it is easy to be dismissive of Ja because this is the first time Memphis has been this high in the standings and has been like this dangerous in the playoffs, and he's so young. But at the same time, you think about his peers, his other young up-and-coming superstars, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Zion Williamson, Nikola Jokic, Devin Booker. Booker's the only one whose team finished higher in the standings than Ja. And yet Giannis is really young as well, but Giannis has been in the league and kind of been there already, having been a champ. So I don't put him among that same group. He's kind of in a half generation older than them. And somebody like an Anthony Edwards, coming in with Minnesota, we can see he's going to be really good, but he hasn't accomplished anything yet. So he's kind of a half generation back. But there's some peers here, and it's easy to look at Ja, and I catch myself doing this too, going, I think Luka might wind up being the better player overall. I think Zion, if he stayed healthy, would have the the chance to be better. Jokic is already better. I mean, he's won an MVP, and maybe that takes Jokic out of the running here. Maybe Jokic should be up in that Giannis tier and not with them. Trae Young, I think Ja is ahead of him, but it's maybe that's unfair.
Ja's ahead of Trae,
yeah. I think it's unfair, even in looking at it, and it shows my bias. But it's like, no, we should probably be talking about Ja ahead of Zion and ahead of Luka Doncic at this point. We really should.
I think Luka's interesting because Luka's also still putting up massive points in games that matter. It's not nearly as flashy for him. His team hasn't been nearly as good this season or last season compared to what we thought it would be like what it was a couple of seasons ago. And, Luka, I mean, it's weird to say Dallas isn't the biggest market for basketball, but like the team's not been like a 60-win team or something like
right.
It was not really on a hot streak, and he wasn't really in the conversation for MVP as far as numbers and stuff, and he's been hurt, and so it sort of takes him out of our zeitgeist because we're not sort of constantly seeing him. But every time you turn on, the highlight shows, John Morant's doing something stupid. Like he's shooting.
I mean, Luka gets
down.
way more national TV games than Ja does.
Yeah, and I bet that changes next year. So that series is looking really good. You brought up Giannis. By the way, Giannis is sneaky 27. Like it feels like that guy should be right on top of 30, but he doesn't turn 28 until this December.
And that's similar with Devin Booker, who's a little younger, but I threw Devin Booker into the same kind of generation as John and Luka, and that's probably
Devin Booker
not
turns 26 in October.
Right, exactly. So Devin Booker probably should be up in the tier more, the generational tier with Giannis and Jokic because they've been around a little bit longer. And Booker, though, came into the league really young. I mean, he was like 18, 19 years old when he came in. So
Jokic just turned 27 a couple months ago.
mm-hmm.
So
they're in their prime.
I want to bring up Giannis because that series has turned out to be super fascinating. A couple blowouts in the games, but for everything that Giannis and Milwaukee did right and what went well for them in the first game, very much did not happen in game two. I was late getting to this game, and at one point I saw it was like 30-12 or something like that, and I was like, no, that's real? That's not like a simulation? That's really what's happening? I think Giannis was 1 for his first 11 shots in the game, even though he put up some nice total numbers by the end of it because the Celtics sort of let Giannis and company get back into the groove.
He really struggled early on.
But also, absolutely. Also, you look at someone like Jaylen Brown, who struggled mightily in game one, was absolutely on a heater in game two. So
what was it? It was like 25 points in the first quarter, and then he scored 5 points the rest of the game, or something crazy like that. Yeah.
So, tell me what can you? We've seen Milwaukee have games like this in the postseason in the last couple of seasons. So I don't want to say this is a bad omen, but Grant Williams is hitting a bunch of threes. Like you have. I think they only went like 7 players on the 7 players that played for the Celtics last night.
Yep.
This C's team, we know is really, really good defensively. It can clamp down. I don't know if you hold Giannis 1 for 11 to start the game ever again in this series, but like they needed game 2 and they got it. And it all started with contested shots everywhere on defense. Even layups, which you thought were layups, were contested early on. And they just made everything difficult for Milwaukee. And they just never could get into a rhythm early and got down big because for Boston, they were hitting everything.
And they did it without Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart, who didn't even play. Derek White gets put into the starting lineup. They didn't miss a beat. They were very lethal. And then Peyton Pritchard was one of the 7 guys. Pritchard, we talked about, did not get to play much in that Brooklyn Nets series because he was going to be overmatched by Kyrie Irving. And Kyrie was playing like 43 minutes a game in that series. So Pritchard was on the floor 5-8 minutes if he got lucky per game. There are no matchups in the Milwaukee backcourt that are going to completely overpower Pritchard in this way. So he's going to play a lot more, and he is a guy that when he comes in, the ball moves. He's able to knock down some shots. So the fact that Boston was able to pull this off, a 23-point win, it was actually more dominant than that. And theoretically, you're going to add Marcus Smart back into that mix, although it may take him a little bit to shake off the cobwebs and rust here, and he may not be entirely healthy the whole series. We don't know.
We got 4 days until the next game. Like it's such a long time sometimes for these.
This is an absolute prize fight of a series because honestly, the winner of this series very well might wind up being the Eastern Conference champ, and that's massive disrespect to Miami, who I know we'll get to in a little bit. Philadelphia is not in that conversation right now unless Embiid comes back and works a miracle, but he still has James Harden as a teammate, and that's a problem, which we all saw coming. Unfortunately, that's just a self-fulfilling prophecy over there. So, this is a prize fight type of series. It does feel like blowouts are capable because these teams can get runs going on each other. Whereas, like in Memphis and Golden State, it's been so close, and both teams go on runs, but they don't. As good a defense as they're playing, the other team goes on a run right with them. They're running right next to each other as they go. Whereas this series with the Bucks and the Celtics, it's like one team goes on a run and the other one catches up. And I think we're going to be seeing quite a bit of that. It's so concerning for Milwaukee to not have Chris Middleton.
Yeah.
To not have that. Not only release valve as a shooter, but Chris Middleton is really good at putting the ball on the floor, getting to his spots, creating different angles and attack vectors that then open up shooters. Now
look at you with attack vectors.
Yeah, you're gonna ask somebody like Bobby Portis and Grayson Allen and Brooke Lopez, who, when Chris Middleton is on the floor, are more of just shot makers, like be in the right spot and we'll get you a good look. and you are a good player who can knock that down. Now you're asking those three guys to go and, hey, you got to get your own good looks. And yes, they can do that, but your success rate's going to be a lot lower when you're having to do that. And so, yeah, it was a testament to Milwaukee, heart of champion type of stuff, and the defense they played in game one on the road in Boston to be able to steal that game. But it in no way surprised me that Boston would be able to come back and throw a really nice punch of their own in game two in front of their home crowd. And somebody like Jaylen Brown, who really struggled in game one, now goes off, and Tatum continues to do his thing. And Milwaukee would have some power outages on offense. Well, they're missing their second best player, and Chris Middleton down the stretch becomes their kind of closer guy for the offense. Giannis still gets his stuff, but it's Middleton who a lot of times is their clutch type of guy. And so you're at, Drew Holiday's at a point in his career being a little bit older where, yeah, he can still do it. And we saw him really step up in game one, but I don't know if Drew Holiday is that guy for 7 games straight. And so, like, Milwaukee was my favorite coming into this series. I was picking them, but as soon as I saw that Middleton was out, I was like, I don't think I can say that anymore. And the playing field got leveled a little bit with Smart being injured now, but we're going to see.
Let me ask you, and then we'll move on to the next series. Both these games have been obviously massive blowouts, one way or the other. We've now seen 2 games without Middleton. We saw 1 game without Marcus Smart. If he's able to come back in game 3, which we think so, but we'll obviously see, in a couple of months when they play game 3. Seeing how you've seen these 2 games go, would you feel better as Milwaukee that you went and got one of the 2 in Boston coming home? Or do you feel better as Boston knowing that you responded to what happened in game 1 without Marcus Smart and possibly getting him back, and now going to Milwaukee knowing that you at least held serve there for getting one of those games, and now you go knowing that you'll probably have your full complement of players?
Subliminally, and I would never say this, but if I'm Mike Budenholzer, I just want splits for right now, and I want to get it to a game 7 and give myself a chance and prolong it to where they said Middleton probably is not back this series, but if I can get it to a game 7, maybe a miracle happens and I get him back. Milwaukee and Boston had identical records all year for very different reasons. Boston started out slow, was, hotter than Hades down the stretch. Milwaukee was just kind of in cruise control throughout the whole year and showed flashes of being the champs, but also showed that flipping the switch type of thing that championship teams do, and they were just trying to keep everybody healthy. And so it is ironic that they tried to keep everybody healthy and they lose Middleton in a playoff series. And now it'd be like, hey, man, this is why seeding matters. If you were Milwaukee and you had won 1 more game during the regular season, right, 1 more game, you'd have a game 7 at home. And instead, you may have to go on the road to Boston in a game 7 without Chris Middleton. But if I'm Mike Budenholzer, like, yeah, clearly you want to win every game that you can. But I do think that Boston right now is the actual favorite, maybe not by much, but is the actual favorite. And they've got a few more weapons at their disposal in the grand scheme of things than Milwaukee does. So if you're the Bucks, like, you got to win 1 at home. If you can win 2, phenomenal, great. But you got to win 1. You got to keep this series tied and going for as long as you can, and hoping that you get Middleton back. And it may not happen, but Milwaukee can win this, but I'm not confident. And I think a lot of people underestimate how important Chris Middleton is to making the whole offense work and to making Giannis look like the MVP that he is. He's an absolute MVP on the defensive end. He's an MVP from the athleticism standpoint and the way that he keeps possessions alive, and the fact that the defense has to be absolutely teed off on everything that he does. But he looks a lot better when he's got open driving lanes. And Chris Middleton is the only guy out of that Bucks roster who creates driving lanes just by being on the floor at all times.
I should mention, by the way, game 3 will be Saturday. So 4 days from yesterday, 3 days from today. So they don't play next calendar year. They actually play still within this month. Miami and Philadelphia I want to talk to you about because, they've already played one of these games. And last time we talked, Philly was still trying to avoid an epic collapse against Toronto. They did so the same night of that Pelicans game. Not nearly as good of a game. What's the first half? The first half was very good and competitive. The second half, Philadelphia was much better.
Yeah, kudos to them for closing it out, not messing around with Toronto. Like that was good.
Although late in the blowout, Joel Embiid's still in the game and gets his face broken up.
Yep.
And he's in concussion protocol, missing definitely at least the first two games, which includes tonight's game.
Yep.
And Miami didn't really need much help as the number one seed and as a very physical basketball team. And they took it to them at Philadelphia in game one and game two against Miami in Miami tonight. I don't know what to expect a lot differently from game two, but, if you wanted to criticize Doc Rivers in the Toronto series, that's fine. They got out of it. That goes away. Well, almost. Because now you get to re-criticize for having Joel Embiid in late in that blowout.
When they were up by 27, 29 points, whatever it was.
Yeah, with 3-4 minutes left in the game?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Joel. It's obviously a stupid decision. We've seen things like this, so we don't have to sort of get into that. But how stupid is it? Like, is that a decision that cost them this series?
Very, very, very possibly. And we can get into all the James Harden slander, but I'm almost tired of it because it's all over the place. And we've also been doing this for the last few years with James Harden. He kind of is who he is in the playoffs, which is not your lead guy. I think you can survive with James Harden as your second wheel, third wheel in the playoffs. And he's got a lot of positives that he brings to the table. He, of course, believes himself to be a number 1A superstar, to get paid like it, to get treated like it. He just isn't. He's a very good scorer. He reminds me a lot of Carmelo Anthony just a few years back, of where Anthony was kind of coming down off the pinnacle of his career. And it's like, look, man, yeah, Carmelo Anthony can score the ball, but can he really be the best player on a championship team? He doesn't do enough other things. Now, James Harden does assist, but the defense kind of comes and goes, and you're stuck with that. You absolutely, 100%, unequivocally, I'm going Stephen A. Smith here, like, you need Joel Embiid to have a shot in this series against a Miami team who, as good as they are, you could, not would, but you could beat the Miami Heat with Joel Embiid. You have a very good chance to make it a long series and beat Miami. Philadelphia only finished 2 games behind the number 1 seed this year, despite having injury issues and despite having Ben Simmons gone and all that stuff. Like, they are on the same footing with Miami if they have Joel Embiid. It is an all-time what-if gaffe if the Sixers go down, especially quickly, and it's going to be a nail in the coffin on James Harden as a superstar player. And Philly's left holding the bag then, because they were dumb enough to have given up Ben Simmons plus usable role players plus picks in order to get James Harden. That's going to be a rough conversation, because there's not a lot of James Harden takers out there in front offices. You got him because you're Daryl Morey. That's why Philly was interested. And there's a lot of big picture implications here that come down to this series, that also come down to Doc Rivers' decision. And Joel Embiid, of course, like, he's a guy that I very much believe wants to win, will do anything to pay that price. And we're nowhere near the point where Joel Embiid, as the face of the franchise and the face of the process and all he's gone through, and I think he's going to be loyal on a Giannis level, the way Giannis has been to Milwaukee. But you could be sowing the seeds now of the type of boneheaded frustrations that eventually push a very motivated, competitive guy out the door because he loses faith in the front office to deliver, much the same way that a guy like Chris Paul or Kevin Garnett eventually got frustrated with their front offices. Anthony Davis too, but he took far less time, and I'm not putting him on the same level as KG or CP3. A guy looks around and goes, I really, really, really want to win, and I'm not sure I can actually do it. So I'm being very premature by saying that, but these are the type of seeds that get planted that grow poison apples later on.
If I'm not mistaken, I just looked it up. I think Joel Embiid only has one more year left on this deal, like it's next season. And, that's a dude a lot of people would want, by the way. That dude, like, I think a lot of me roots for Philadelphia as much as I picked them because of Joel Embiid. That dude's a gamer. He's fighting. He was already fighting through the thumb thing. Now his face is broken and he's got the concussion. He's definitely out for game 2. The timetable has not been set for when he could return. In fact, Doc Rivers was asked about it. He said, I think he did something yesterday, but I don't want to get hope up, so I'm just going to stop there. That doesn't sound great to me, by the way, when you don't even want to kind of hint that going back to Philadelphia over the weekend might be something that you...
It's also, though, I would say this, it's also the playoffs, so you're going to play coy because you don't want the other team to be able to plan for or against having him. In a regular season, maybe you get a little more than that, but I hear what you're saying.
I still read a little bit into that. I'm not thinking that at this point, Doc... Okay. This is, if they end up losing this series, especially if they lose in 5 games, this is a massive failure for Philadelphia.
Maybe even time to fire Doc Rivers, right?
I would think that would be high on your list if you're Daryl Morey. And I know that guy's he's loyal, but Daryl Morey came in after Doc Rivers, did he not? Daryl Morey was afterwards, so he doesn't have to be loyal to Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers was already there. So if you want to bring in somebody new, I wouldn't hate it because if you're looking at what Philadelphia could be, it's better than this. And granted, you put yourself in a really miserable position by keeping Joel Embiid as late as you did in that game. But you know what? A lot of Roosters are coming home. Right?
That's why you're supposed to have James Harden, right?
Yeah,
that's why you're supposed to have another 1A
apparently
superstar.
No one saw this hitting into a wall face first, which is what's happened with James Harden. I didn't see it coming. I didn't see that he would go from gradually, but to go it felt like overnight. It felt like overnight he went to completely ineffective. Did he not only is he not a number 1 option on your team, he's arguably not even close to a number 2 option on your team right now. This is not your leader by any stretch, even if it's just points.
The psychological seeds of doubt have been planted for years now with James Harden, and the bravado that he puts up with it, the fake machismo about it. I'm just using all the big words today. That front, which we see with Russell Westbrook all the time, where it's I don't care, man. But here, let me go into a 20-minute long rant that actually shows how much I care, but I'm telling you I don't care. It's there. It's rattling around. It's so defensive. And rather than acknowledging it, working through it, adapting, there's just this stubbornness that goes, what was so good about me that got me to this point is what I'm going to keep doing. And they completely miss the point that what you're doing right now, is whether it worked in the past or not, is not actually working. And that was the downfall of Carmelo's superstardom. It was the downfall of Iverson. It's been the downfall of plenty very talented star level players where they did not, would not, could not eat green eggs and ham, and they couldn't adjust. They just refused to adjust. Those that have been able to adjust and let their supporting cast help them and figured out, how can I help my supporting cast? It's been so different and jarring most of the time. And yeah, there are certain superstars who never really had to adjust because they were transcendent, but the level of those guys is so small. And Father Time came for Michael Jordan. Father Time is coming for LeBron. Father Time came for Kobe Bryant. Like, it still happened. And if you didn't adjust, like Kobe wouldn't adjust either. Kobe could have played longer. He could have, but he didn't want to. He wanted to be able to take his 40 shots a game, and the Lakers were bad enough to, and Kobe had put in enough with that franchise that
he
they
took
could
it all the way
him.
took it all the way to the end of the end of his contract, end of his career.
Yeah, so. And there's something honorable about that, but like this. When you talk about it being surprising to you, it's not to me, because James Harden has not been a guy that's taken care of his body during his career. He has not shown, at least publicly, again, I don't know what he's like behind the scenes and with coaches and whatever, but he has not shown any level of humility or flexibility when it comes to, or adaptability, any of that stuff, when it comes to his contributions to a team and his place on a team. He's had clashes with fellow star teammates everywhere he's gone, with the exception of early Oklahoma City, because he was not a star yet and couldn't have acted like that. But once he achieved that level in Houston, it was almost immediate that every sidekick that came in, he had some sort of problem with every time. Like, there's a pattern there. This does not surprise me. It's very, again, I keep saying these guys' names, but there's an archetype. It's very Iverson-esque. It's very Carmelo-esque. And we're seeing the same thing happen with Russell Westbrook right now, too.
I'm not surprised that it's happening. I'm just surprised at how quickly it's happening based on how good he was like last season, effective he was last season. The fact that to be able to go, I guess that injury, may have been something that sort of really accelerated everything into this. He just never really was the guy that we thought he could be. Go ahead.
There's still time to turn this around. That's the positive part. But the side that you see as mental behind this is not that, okay, James Harden only had 16 points in a game that he had to step up. It's that James Harden took 13 shots in a game he had to step up. That Tyrese Maxey, that Tobias Harris had more attempts than the 1A superstar. And that this is a multi-time thing now with James Harden, where in games that you knew ahead of time it was going to be really tough, he shrank back and didn't want it. And I don't say that in the hyperbolic, oh, you got to want this win type of thing. Like, he literally didn't want the ball in his hands, didn't want to shoot the ball, didn't want to be the one who missed, to take the smoke, to take the blame, whatever it was. Like, we saw that happen in Brooklyn. We saw that happen at the tail end with Houston. It's jarring for a guy who we know is capable, and when things are going well, would have no second thoughts about jacking up 40 shots and having 60 points, because we've seen him do it, and he's so talented and such a good, smart player, like, who figured out how to take his strengths and limitations and build a Hall of Fame scoring career out of manipulating the game.
Yeah.
But that's the guy who can only muster 13 shots in a game that your team needed you that badly? What?
It's frustrating. Yeah, it's frustrating. We don't have much time, but I do want to mention that the Heat also play in that series, and that Kyle Lowry is going to be out again. I think it's 4 straight games. He's going to be out, but it's worked out for Miami so far. And by the way,
they are who they are. I mean, we've given Miami a lot of airtime coming into this, so I'm okay with just kind of brushing over them. They are a professional, hard-nosed outfit that is going to take advantage of your weakness. And they are going to pinpoint on James Harden's weaknesses right now and feed on that.
When I saw that Joel Embiid was going to be out for at least the first 2 games, I retweeted a GIF of Jimmy Butler just waving bye-bye, because it's like,
what he was doing was waving hello to James Harden, going, "We waiting for you, my friend."
Miami's not the team to mess around with, man. Like, they're the team will just quietly dispatch of you, and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that they were that good. Yeah, they are. They're not as flashy as everybody else. They don't have all the drama that everybody else does, except for the one time when the coach and player were arguing over dinner or something like that. So, the Suns and the Mavs are the other game. The Mavs played really well in the fourth quarter to make the game look a lot closer than what it was. Luka just refused to quit in that game. 45 points in 44 minutes. Good on him. But also good on the Suns. And by the way, people, pay my man DeAndre Ayton. I'm just telling you, the guy deserves every nickel he's going to get. But up and down that lineup for the Suns, they produced and they were good for all four quarters. Less in the fourth quarter, but they had a big lead anyway. They produced and were good, man. They are good, and I think that they're the favorite, obviously, in this series. I think there's just too much there for Phoenix not to be able to win this series. I think this series is going to end up being easier for them than the New Orleans series was.
It very well might, because New Orleans was so unconventional in the length that they trotted out on the floor. The fact that CJ McCollum was their point guard and everybody else was like 6'10", 6'9" for New Orleans, and lanky and athletic, and they made it weird. New Orleans did, and then of course you had Devin Booker out and that sort of thing too. Dallas is a much more conventional lineup, even though Luka is a big point guard, but they put Jalen Brunson out there with him, who's a very conventional sized point guard, and everything else is very conventional in that starting lineup. The guys coming off the bench, people are knocking that Dallas doesn't have a supporting cast. I think their supporting cast right now is better than it was with Porzingis. They rebalanced things and saw kind of where their strengths were. But you see time and again that Luka is the only guy who can make something happen from nothing for like more than a quarter. Jalen Brunson, really good player and is going to get a bag of money here. Spencer Dinwiddie, really good player. Everybody else on that roster, really good at their role that they play. But Dinwiddie and Brunson, while they can have big games and they can manufacture some stuff, do you really want to trust either of them for more than a quarter to be like your number one scoring option? No, you don't. And so Dallas is stuck with that. Whereas on the other hand, with Phoenix, there was something with them last year, and it's continued to this year, just intangible about the way they fit, the ethos that's there. I am still not convinced that Phoenix is the most talented team in the Western Conference. They might be the fourth most talented team in the Western Conference when you look at some of these different rosters. Like Devin Booker is a phenomenal scorer and is budding as but I shouldn't even call him necessarily a two-way player, but he's a two-way gamer. Like he's competing on the other end and he's getting better in areas. Chris Paul, Hall of Famer, still is wowing us. But Chris Paul, you would never put as your 1A guy. DeAndre Ayton's not a 1A guy. Mikal Bridges, who is now like getting to be close to an all-star, all-defensive type of guy, and he was in running for Defensive Player of the Year. Not a 1A guy either. But what you have right now is a 1B in Devin Booker, and you've got three other guys who are capable on any quarter to become the lead guy, and really for any game capable to be the lead guy. So you've got four different choices in your starting lineup, and everybody else fits their role and fits with those guys, and they're on the same page. And that's what, when healthy, Phoenix they attack on both ends, and they don't let up. And we don't think of them maybe as hard-nosed or defensive. And I think that's part of that is a bias because Phoenix historically has not trotted out those type of teams in their franchise history. But the Suns are really, really good and pesky defensively. And they don't even necessarily play at like the highest pace. But when they get out, their speed kills and their decision-making speed in the half court kills.
Yeah, I mean, DeAndre Ayton, this whole postseason, I think has had one game that he scored under 20 points or under 19 or 20 points. And He's getting nearly a double every night. Just pretty much close there. I mean, he shoot close to the basket, so he's making almost all his shots. I mean, I'll go to the wall for that guy. You don't think he's a 1A guy? I think he's pretty. If he's not, he's really close for me. And maybe it's because of how he fits on this team and his role on this team is where he's going to get that money and where he's sort of seen like that from me. But I think I've watched that guy grow over the last year or so, and I think he is budding into something that is really, really special. And I'm a big DeAndre Ayton guy, so I like him on this team a whole heck of a lot. I've seen him dominate, like to add to your point, I've seen him dominate quarters many times where you're like, oh, I thought Devin Booker was the guy. No, this DeAndre Ayton dude can score like 12, 14 points in a quarter, and you're like, where did that guy come from? He's the big, tall, center, lanky kid that's running around all the time.
The thing I really appreciate about DeAndre Ayton, which I also appreciate about these Suns, is that they are willing, no matter their pedigree and their pay grade, to just fill in all the gaps that are needed. There's an egolessness about them. DeAndre Ayton was the number 1 pick. He's the number 1 pick, but he's been willing to play around Booker and around Paul, fill in the stuff that they don't do, and understand that they're going to make his job infinitely easier when he makes their jobs easier. Chris Paul, throughout his career has wanted guys who were running mates who could take over at various points and carry that load. And sometimes he's had it, with the Clippers. He had it for a tiny bit with David West in New Orleans when he was a Pelican, or a Hornet, I should say, back at that point. But he's got that now. And Devin Booker, despite being your 1A, 1B guy, is so multifaceted offensively and so unselfish as well, because he had to play point guard for these Suns teams during the dark days.
Yeah.
And he knows how to. So I think there's like this appreciation there. You can see it just oozing out of them to have other guys around them that make life easier, and it makes them go to work to do whatever they can to just keep the machinery humming. And it's Warriors-esque. It's really refreshing the way that they're attacking this. And then you got a guy like Mikal Bridges, who, when paired with Ayton, and Chris Paul, who's a defensive Hall of Famer on his own, that are just lock-up type players. And you got a Jay Crowder in there who's a lock-up type player. Torrey Craig is a very solid defender. JaVale McGee has been a very solid defender on the back end of his career here. And that just makes things so much easier for a young guy like Cam Johnson or Cam Payne to come in, and Landry Shamet to do his thing. They've got all of the different roles filled. Everybody knows their job, does their job, and better yet, seems to revel in doing their job.
Game 2 of that series is tonight, Wednesday night, if you're listening to this here podcast. Joel, that's going to do it for us, man. We'll be back next week. I don't expect any of these series to be done by the time we get back, but I don't know. Weird things have happened. Joel, would you like to say goodbye to the good people?
Goodbye, everyone, on behalf of Arky, Shea, and theoretically on behalf of Rick Smits. This has been episode 104. See, I had to get that little dig in there. Episode 104. Find us on YouTube, like, share, subscribe over there, ring the bell, and Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. This has been Basketball by Association, and we will see you next week.
Hope you guys enjoyed Joel's last appearance.